Hemp planes. Is it possible? I'm sure it is. Wooden planes. You know, the Mosquito Bomber from World War II was one of the most successful fighter bomber, twin engine bomber, medium range bombers of the war. It was multi-rolled. It used cannons and rockets to attack submarines and shipping, to extended bomb bays to carry massively big bombs for trying to smash submarine pens and all sorts of things. Hit bridges when the Lancasters and the big 4-engine bombers were missing. They did daring raids. They were fast. They were used as photo reconnaissance because they were so fast. So they proved to be strong. They can carry a lot of weight, a lot of payload, and they could fly in very adverse conditions. So, and then we seen all the World War I planes that were basically made out of wood and canvas. So, and I believe that there was also amphibious planes of World War II that were also made out of wood and canvas. So they can be treated to handle wet conditions. So, and the best thing is they're grown from the ground. It's not mining, so they're totally renewable resources. So if we can make things from hemp and then introduce plastics as well, so then that should be able to cut the costs of manufacturing, because there's less cutting and all that sort of stuff. Once the dyes are made, I don't see why the casting of the plastics or the extruding of the plastics or whatever you call it. I'm not a plastic engineer or anything. I don't know anything about that, but I understand casting is a lot cheaper than machining, you know. So if we can make fiber reinforced polymers or nylons or whatever they're called from plastic, and they're meant to be stronger than steel, lighter than steel, etc., why can't we make planes out of them? Okay. Again, to kickstart a manufacturing thing here. Look, as it is, Australia can't produce anything. Australia's not producing anything at all. We're not producing cars anymore. We don't produce planes. We don't produce anything. We're very limited in what we make. We're losing jobs left, right, and centre. We've sold off everything to China, which is absolutely disgraceful. So I'm thinking of simple things. Everyone might have heard about the debacle with our submarines. Okay, we've had major issues with Joint Strike Fighters, with the submarine problems, the Euro Tiger helicopters, Sea Sprite helicopters. I think it was Sea Sprite helicopters. You know, there's so many failings. Okay, so why don't we just start at the ground level again, go straight back to the drawing boards, get people involved, and make some things that we can use to defend this country, build this country. And when I'm saying defend the country, I'm not talking about people invading us. I'm talking about defense from natural disasters. We're a continent of extreme weather conditions. So whether that's droughts, whether that's extremely bad bushfires in the southern half of the country, cyclones and storms, etc., etc. You know, there's a use, and I see a use for a small, lightweight plane that's multi-role. Everything's got to be multi-role. You know, I'm a bit involved with I made prepping and survival and self-defense part of my life. Not just, it is a hobby, but I've just made it part of my life, and then that way I'm not wasting money. You know, I recycle through the food that I keep. I always keep a few months worth of food. I've actually been using it this week, you know, to get rid of some of my older stock. So, again, like in the last video, I'll say Two is one, one is none. Now, people who have been covering bushfires around the world and especially in Australia, you would see that there's a plane that they call the air tractor. I think it's the 802 Fire Boss, it might be called. And it's an agricultural plane. It's a turboprop plane. It has float. Sorry, no, it does. Yes, some of them have floats and other ones don't. Actually, the Fire Boss does have floats, I believe. So what it does, instead of operating out of an airport, it's got floats and it can skim along the water, fill the floats up with water, and then take off again, drop its payload on the fire, and then go back to a river or a large dam or body of water, skim the water again, and take off. And that's what it does. That it can carry quite a large payload. Is it like 3 tons of water? Which is, don't quote me, I could be a couple of 100 kilos off that. But it carries a decent payload. Problem is, that plane is expensive, costs a lot of money to maintain, and as far as I'm concerned, there's not enough of them. But what if we could have now there's a plane called a Piper Cub, and there's other the more modern ones, the Super Cub. They were designed in the 1930s. They're a very small, lightweight plane, very basic skeleton construction. They were successfully used in World War One. Oh, sorry, in World War Two. I'm sure in Korea. I haven't read about Korea, but again, they were used in Vietnam as forward observation platforms for artillery strikes, etc. The reason being is they can hover. Okay, they got a low stall speed, so that means they can travel slowly and they won't fall out of the sky. So what they can actually do is, because they're prop planes, a jet plane can't fly very low, especially with a large payload. But a propeller plane can dip its tail and use the props to put basically torque. It's like, you're spinning your tires on the road, but the propellers are pushing the air. So they can sort of hover around like this, so they can go extra slow. And the lighter weight it is, the slower it can go. So these little planes, I'll try and put some photos, and I will also maybe put a link. I think I'll only be able to put one link, or I don't even know how to really put links in my description box, but I'll try and put something there. It's a Piper Cub, Piper Super Cub. And if you look at these planes, in Alaska and other places, they're doing competitions where it's short takeoff and landing. So these guys are taking off and landing in, 10 to 14 meters or something like that. They can take off, put on the brake, maximum power, then they go, and take off. And when they come down to land, they're doing the same thing. They come down slow as they can, go, hit the brakes and stop. Okay, so there's lots of YouTube videos on there. They're extremely impressive. They're very small, ultra lightweight, and they're quite cheap planes too. So I guess what I'm getting at is, if they're made of steel and canvas or fiberglass, etc., etc., I don't see a reason why they could not be made from wood, plywood, sort of hemp or flax-made, fiber reinforced structures, plastics, canvases, etc., etc., made extremely light, extremely cheap. And could they use a small little motor, the same as what I was talking about before in the last video about the Schwimmwagen? A very small whether it's ethanol fuel, diesel fuel, turbo, 750cc, something like that produces 40 to 70 horsepower or something along those sort of lines. Because these little tiny planes, they use little tiny engines as well. They don't go very fast. I think they're only doing like maybe 120, 140 k's an hour or something along those lines. But they can also travel as low as around 60 kilometers an hour. So now, if you scale down, what my sort of dream is if you scale down the air tractor trail boss or fire boss, whatever it's called, and you have a little tiny plane like the Piper, which the Piper Cubs, Super Cubs, they actually do have float plane variants of it anyway, so they're already out there. You can see them on YouTube. I'm thinking if you were just to modify their floats, why couldn't they then skim the water, pick up water, even if they're only picking up 200 kilos, 250 kilos? 5 of those planes will have a ton, you know, if it's 200 kilos. Now, if they're extremely cheap, why can't they be mass produced in this country and used in all of the services again? Why can't they? And if it was made with the idea of saturating the place with them, if they're float planes or if they have the balloon tires like the other ones, they can land in they're designed to operate out of unprepared rough landing strips, and obviously with the floats they can land in water. So then that opens up a whole range of places where they can be used. I believe that they're very easy to take the wings off them as well, because they're usually sold in kit form as well, so they could be transported in trucks and shipping containers quite easily, and trains to moved across to different parts of the country where they're needed. So if we got bushfires down Kangaroo Island like last year, why couldn't they call reinforcements from all over the country to come down here, and we're just bombarding the fires around strategic points, because a plane can go where obviously ground forces can't go. And, you know, introduce drones as well. You could use drones for finding the best place, or you could use the little planes themselves as a spotter, an aerial spotter, and he spots, okay, this is the hot spot, or this is the most effective spot to attack, and then he just draws it. He calls in the volunteer Air Force, you know. If we have Air Force cadets, Air Force reservists, Air Force pilots, rural fire pilots, farmers who own planes, other enthusiasts who are pilots, who want to own a plane, why not give them a cheap option that's made in Australia, gives jobs to people, but at a short... And because it can be taken off anywhere, it could be kept on a property in a shed and could take off from unprepared landing strips, so we don't need to worry about airports, choking airports and things like that. Obviously, there'd be supporting staff and jobs for maintaining them and reconditioning engines and building engines, etc., and making all the components for them. But if a ship's sinking at sea, instead of having expensive planes that cost millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands, and you want some volunteers during the middle of the week when everybody's working, people who own businesses or people who have normal 9-to-5 jobs and they're away from their plane, if a ship goes down or a boat's missing and capsized or something like that, and they have to go to an airport. They have to go to an airport to get to their planes and take off. You know, where if you had a whole bunch of these that were just on remote little airstrips, and you had heaps of them, it just gives more opportunity for more people, more eyes in the air to look for that stricken vessel or to attack that fire. If you've got float planes on there, if you've got floats on the plane, and now we have, or you can take off and land on very short runways, etc., etc. If you've got people who are flooded in areas, you know, a plane could come down, land on a remote sort of very short runway, pick up people, drop off supplies, pick up sick, and the flying doctors could use them for picking up people. I see it endless. It's just another part of our defense of our nation, defending our people of our nation, not against warfare, but against everyday circumstances and disasters that happen. And plus, why not have a volunteer? Imagine having really cheap but safe little planes that Air Force cadets could afford to fly around in. Make them safe because they have propellers. If the engine stops turning, it doesn't mean it's just going to, or if they're losing power in a jet engine, and they'll just fall out of the sky. But with a propeller, you can always tilt the wings and put some load on the props and bring it down to the ground, and they can hover and land just about anywhere. So these are just more ideas, Make wooden, hemp, plastic, canvas planes that are extremely cheap. The more of them out there, the better. There's so many things that they could be used for, whether it is spraying crops or, like I said, fighting fires or whatever, or just for learner pilots to fly in. It'll just make flying more affordable. And if there is an emergency of some description, doesn't matter what it is, you could get 1 or 2 people with a little bit of kit, or one person with more kit or more supplies to that area in a very short amount of time, and they can land wherever they need to land. Whether it's if something's going on in Papua New Guinea, or one of the islands close by, Timor or something like that, you could have a whole bunch of help in no time. A plane can always fly faster because it's going in a straight line than a vehicle can get there. So that's just, and it also gets out engineers and starts getting manufacturing, and then maybe we start building little planes like this that turn into bigger planes, and then we can start getting an aero industry happening all over again. Same with the car. Start with a little Schwimmwagen-y sort of thing that everybody likes, that's affordable, and then from there the aftermarket can do all the research and development they want to it, and then that pushes technology, and then we can step into making better vehicles, trucks and vans and all sorts of things. Who knows where it could go. All I'm trying to do is spark someone else's brain that's better and more capable than I. So also another thing with propeller engines and things like that is dogfighting is over. Okay, so this is now stepping into the military side. I'll stop it here and make another video.